Now, I know y'all may be reading this caption and y'all may be like, what the hell does Tony Rock, Chris Rock, and Stephen A. Smith got to do with Shedeur Sanders? Like, how does this all match up? Well, I'm here to tell you, if you've been watching First Take, you know over the years that Chris Rock and Stephen A. Smith have had a friendship. Y'all know when Chris Rock got the sonic ring smacked out of him by Will Smith, that Stephen A. Smith was upset because that's his homeboy, that's his friend, that's his partner them. You hear me? So we know that they have a valid relationship. And in those valid relationships, if Stephen A. Smith is the sports expert guy, then you know that there will be conversations. I will be having conversations with Stephen A. Smith if he was my homie. In this particular conversation that Tony Rock brings up, he's speaking about Shedeur Sanders. Not only are they talking about Shedeur Sanders, but they're talking about the involvement of his pappy, Deion Sanders. They start the conversation off by talking about Shedeur Sanders and how he was undrafted and how he came out and said, hey man, I tried to have my dad as my agent, but it's not working out right now. So I signed a dotted line with a new agent, Drew Rosenhaus. And 30 minutes later, he was signed as a free agent.
30 minutes after.
Fired him from being, Deion was
he was his agent.
His agent. Wow.
Oh, wow. So is Deion Shedeur's agent?
Deion was Shiloh's agent. He said, Pops, I'm going to ride this out myself, and signed with Drew Rosenhaus. And within I'd say within an hour.
Easily.
So
Shedeur's still with Deion? So,
well, he stuck with the dad. Well, he should have cut it loose of the dad long time ago, just like him.
Now, I've said in previous videos, and nobody wants to listen to me. Nobody wants to hear it because a lot of people, see, we're fans, but they're not actually people that's behind in these front offices, behind these desks, that's dealing with Shedeur Sanders, his representation, which is his father. They're not the ones that got to deal with that. We just like whatever he does on the field, which is very understandable. And I understand why people feel like Shedeur Sanders was done wrong. And I do think to an extent he was done wrong. But previously in my videos, I've said I also think that we have to give Shedeur and Deion Sanders the accountability that they deserve, to where they were wrong in how they moved in situations. And y'all done let me have it. Y'all been calling me bootlickers, coons, Uncle Toms. And it's just always crazy to me, man, how our people, we are so quick to call somebody a hater when there's an objective opinion. I'm just here to say that both things can be right. Now, the conversation is going to turn into a whole different direction when Tony Rock drops some valuable information, some exclusive information, because he said how he texted his brother, Chris Rock, one of the most famous comedians in the world. And like we said, he has a good, close relationship and rapport with Stephen A. Smith. And he said how if you're a head coach that drafts Shedeur Sanders, then you're potentially already hiring the next man up in Deion Sanders to coach your team. Because clearly if you come from a terrible team and you draft this quarterback, which means you're probably already on the hot seat, and if this season doesn't work out, then guess what? Let's hire the guy who's been coaching this franchise quarterback, potential franchise quarterback, his whole life. You see, Shedeur has never played for anybody else other than his dad. So why not give him the most comfortable position, the most comfortable coaching for him to succeed and be the best quarterback he can be in this league and bring our franchise some W's.
Part two. And here's the funny thing. Look, this is so dope. I'm so glad we brought this up. So I text my brother, Chris, and I said, the problem with Shedeur is Deion is so closely, entangled in Shedeur's career that if let's say you drafted in the first 20 picks, right? You drafted in the first 20 picks because your team is shitty, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Most of the time, because sometimes some people trade up, but most of the time, if you draft within the first 1 to 15, your team is shitty.
Right.
Yeah.
So now the season starts, and you have Shedeur on the bench. and your team is already shitty. That's why you drafted early, and you're losing 3 or 4 games in a row
easily.
And now everybody's like, "Yo, put Shedeur in," right? But now the coach is on the hot seat. Who do you think is the first person they're going to think of to hire as their new coach? We got Shedeur sitting here. Deion's going to come in and bring so much more fanfare, so much more eyes, so much more money. So you realistically, if you're a coach and you draft Shedeur in the first round, you are drafting your successor. You are drafting the guy that's going to take your job. I told my brother that. And about 2 hours later, Stephen A. Smith texted my brother and said, honestly, I don't think it had anything to do with Shedeur. If you're an NFL head coach, drafting Shedeur meant you were more than likely also drafting your replacement in Deion. If Tomlin, Steelers, drafts him and they don't win the Super Bowl, Deion will immediately be the coach next year. If Deion was a bad coach, Shedeur would have went in the first round.
So you think they saw that coming?
I said,
saw that possibility
I said
coming?
the same fucking thing. Me and Stephen A. Smith was here.
It was a package deal.
You guys should do it.
It was a package deal. And
so
that's why
coaches were afraid of that.
That's why Shedeur should have been got rid of his dad.
Now, I somewhat agree with what Stephen A. Smith and Tony Rock are saying, but I disagree with the example that Stephen A. said. You using the man with probably the best job security in the league and Coach Mike Tomlin in the most historic franchise who's had like 4 coaches their entire existence, which means that all their coaches have longevity. It just doesn't make sense to say that scenario. Deion Sanders is not about to come in and be the head coach of the Steelers just because they drafted his baby boy, when in actuality, I think that the only way Coach Tomlin is going to not be the coach is if he tells them, I'm willing to leave. I want to leave. This man has never had a losing season. He's been in the playoffs now. It's been a drought since he's won a playoff game. I'll give them that. But also look at the talent. They're giving him minimal talent. They're giving him Kenny Pickett. What am I supposed to do with that? In all honesty, I think Deion Sanders has to prove that he can get to a distinct level on the college level. We liked what he did, but there's still more to prove, in my personal opinion, before he just becomes an NFL head coach. So while I think that I understand the feeling of the head coach that drafts Shedeur Sanders and how they may be feeling when they draft him, I just look at the optics. And for me, I just don't see what they're saying really making sense. In all honesty, my theory is I think that Deion Sanders is a part of the reason that Shedeur didn't get drafted as high as he did. Part of it, though. I don't think that it's from him potentially being a head coach, though. I think that Deion Sanders probably ruined his own son's draft stock by trying to use the same blueprint that he used over 30 years ago to get into the NFL. He thinks that his son had the privilege of being a Eli Manning, when in actuality, his son wasn't the consensus #1 quarterback like Eli Manning was, like a John Elway was. So you do what you want when you popping. These people were popping and they had more leverage than Shedeur Sanders. And we have to be honest, Shedeur Sanders never had a signature win in college football. That's just what it is. A lot of people were in my comments. They said, well, what about Johnny Manziel? He was a white boy that stayed in trouble and he got drafted in the first round as a lottery pick and Shedeur Sanders didn't. But guess what? Johnny Manziel had the signature wins. Yeah, he beat Alabama. He beat teams. That's what I'm saying. He rebuilt a program in the SEC against top talent. That's why. We don't have to make this a white or black thing. Jameis Winston did the same thing. He stayed in trouble. He was stealing crab legs. He was standing on tables talking about, I'm a F right in the cookie. He was immature, but he got you to 2 different national championships. He got a Heisman. What are we talking about? This isn't white or black, in my personal opinion. I think it's more of a character issue that they have with Shedeur Sanders. And I think that it's an attachment to his father and his father being too involved. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that I agree. What I'm saying is this is how these people look at the situation. And with that being said, I have to say this, man. I think that we're getting too caught up as to what round Shedeur Sanders was drafted, when in actuality, it does not matter. This is not a big deal, people. Yes, we can sit here and think he was done wrong, and we can sit here and be like, damn, he lost out on 30 to 50 million. He's already rich, people. He already comes from privilege. He's set for life. That money is going to be made when it's time to get made. If he is who we think he is, he's going to come out here. He's going to strive. He's going to get this starting position. And then that's going to be all that she wrote. Tom Brady, he was drafted late round. It's a lot of quarterbacks that can tell you this story. It's a lot of people, a lot of athletes that can tell you this story. It is what it is. A kid from privilege being punished for his privilege. I hate to hear it, but guess what? We think he's a dog anyway. Get out there and go prove to these people that you are who you are. They saying that the Giants gave him a package. They said, we want you to study this playbook, and we're going to talk about this in the interview. When they did the interview, he didn't realize that some of them, they put mistakes in there on purpose just to see if he would catch it. To me, that's brilliant interviewing. To the public that's never seen this type of stuff, that doesn't know anything about the draft process, they feel like he was being unjustly did wrong. That's why I think that we as the people, we got to understand a business perspective, they're trying to figure out who they're investing their money in. Who are we investing our time in? Y'all just can't sit here and be like, oh, he's just done wrong. No, we got to test everything. IQ, athleticism, book smarts, character. It's easy to say this is the person when it's not your money, but when it's your money, you gonna figure out everything about that person before you invest in them. So y'all let me know what y'all think about this situation, man. Do y'all think this Shedeur? Do you think that it's more so Deion trying to be his coach? That's what hindered him? Do you think that it's gonna be a situation where it was his character? Do y'all think that? What do we think about it, man? I don't really have to get too much into it. Y'all just saw the video. What do y'all think is the situation that didn't help Shedeur from getting where he needed to get, man? Like, share, subscribe, comment, hit that notification bell, and we out, baby. Boom! IG-TheLaFlareLounge.
It's him.